So, welcome to this presentation of Revit to Max and how to create high quality renders. We're going to start in Revit and have a look at how we can create photorealistic renders inside Revit. Then we're going to export our Revit model via the FBX format and take it into Studio Max and see how we can enhance our rendering and rendering techniques in Studio Max. We're also going to create some beauty passes from Studio Max and see what we can do with them in the post-production phase. Here in Revit we have a quite simplistic model, white walls, wooden floor and red backdrop wall. And the first thing we're going to have a look at is actually the sun and shadow settings. So I'm going to enable shadows here and see what's happening. Not so fancy, so I'm going to go to settings and sun and shadow settings. Here we can choose from different positions all over the world. We can also make our own settings here. And I am in Helsinki right now, so I'm going to go with Helsinki in May and hit apply and see what's happening. It looks kind of nice, so I'm going to hit OK there, and I can see that this creates some nice sun and shadow pattern on the backdrop wall and also on the staircase, so I'm satisfied with that. Next thing we're going to have a look at is materials. So I'm going to settings and materials, wood flooring here, and the tab that are of our interest is the render appearance, so I'm going to hit that. I'm going to change the preview view to spread on a newspaper there and update it. We have a texture, we can see that. We can set the sample size, we can do rotation, we can set the brightness, etc, etc. What's our interest right now is the finish, and we have the satin vanish here, which makes a reflection, and we can see that in the preview view here. During the test renders I'm gonna go with unfinished, no reflection. That will speed up our rendering time, so I'm gonna go with unfinished there. The wall, the white, it's just a solid RGB color. The finish is flat matte, no reflections. The same goes with the red wall. It's a solid red color, flat matte. And also we have a look at the frame here, the window frame, it's chocolate. There we have actually some reflections, some glossy reflections. We will go with that also in the test rendering. It's such a small surface area, so we will not decrease our rendering time so much. So I will hit OK here. So we have had the look at the sun and shadow settings and the materials. Next thing we're going to go is open up the render dialog, which is on the design bar. Here we have the region render. I'm going to talk about that and show you that later. We have some quality settings here and the presets. So draft to best, they speak for themselves. Draft is the fastest one, also creates the lowest resolutions, etc. We can also do a custom specified render settings. We have the output settings, and we're going to go with printer, set to dpi, the smallest one and fastest one. The lighting we already set, and the sun and the lighting settings. The background I'm going to go with a few clouds, and the haze is going to be clear. So I'm satisfied with that. I'm going to hit render and see what's happening. So I reckon this is going to go pretty fast, and we can already see here it starts rendering. We see it's going to be a little bit too over bright here. I can see that already now, and the resolution is not the best, but it's a draft here, so it's going pretty fast also. So instead of tweaking the render settings, we're going to actually adjust the exposure control here, and I can see that the highlights, they are too washed out, too burned out, so I'm going to go with the highlights to 0 actually and hit apply. And what's really good with this exposure control, that it is interactive, so whatever settings I make in my exposure control, I can just apply it and it automatically update my rendering, so I don't have to re-render my picture. Okay, mid-tones, it's still a little bit too bright here, so I'm going to go with the mid-tones to 02, hit apply, update. Now I see, okay, it looks kind of nice here, but it's a little bit too dark around, so I will lighten up the shadows. This lighter 01, hit OK. Didn't do so much the picture, and I have the exposure value also here, so I can make that brighter. So I will actually hit 8 there and see what's happening. Okay, it's still a little bit dark here, but I know from experience we have the draft setting, so it's not so much light bouncing around, not so many bounces of light, so it's getting a little bit darker. When we're gonna go for more high quality settings, it's gonna be more light bounces, and the room is gonna be a little bit lighter. So from experience, I'm just gonna keep it this way. This time, next render, I'm gonna go to edit here. I have the draft, and I'm gonna copy it to custom. So I'm going to do my own specified rendering settings. The image precisions here, I'm going to go with 2. Be careful with the image precision, because when you increase that, it also increases the rendering times a lot. The maximum of reflections could be 2. I'm satisfied with that, and I'm going to go with 1 here. I'm going to go through this really fast. Brilliant reflections 1, no soft shadows. And here we have the indirect illumination bounces. It's 2 now, so I will increase that to 4. We'll make the picture more brighter. And I'm going to do the precision there to 2 and smooth that to 2 and hit OK and just hit render and see what's happening. It's going to take some extra time to render now if you compare to the first one, but it's still going to be pretty fast. I can see already now that the walls here are much brighter than before, so it looks kind of nice already. We see it's not so bright here either, and now it starts rendering. We see it's still kind of low resolution, but it's better, and we see the walls are quite nice actually. So I think what I can see from now that I'm pretty satisfied with this settings from the exposure control. It looks kind of nice, not too over bright and not too dark. So I think this is going to look really nice when you go to high quality settings. So next thing we're going to have a look at is to set on the reflections on the floor there. So I'm going to pan down to the flooring here. I go to render appearance and just going to change this from unfinished to setting there and hit OK. So I'm just going to check the reflections, and I'm going to do that by do a region render, and I'm just going to take a strip of my picture of my room here to render to just check the reflections. I think that's enough. Hit render and see what's happening. Okay, it's still calculating here. Okay, it's up and going. And now we can see the reflections already in this preview. We can see the reflections. We see the red wall is reflected in the floor here, and we can see the reflections here. This is kind of still low resolution render, so we can't really see so much about it, but we can see that the reflections are there, and I think this is gonna look pretty nice when it's up and going. So yeah, you can see the window is reflective here, so I'm satisfied with the reflections also. So what I'm gonna do next is actually go for a high quality render. We don't have time to see that in live. It's so I have pre-made one here, and I'm gonna open up that one now, and this is what come out from the render. I just went to the presets and did the high quality, hit render with the same settings that I showed you before, and this is what came out, and I'm pretty satisfied with that one. It just rendered, took about 6.5 minutes, so really fast. Okay, let's see what we can benefit from and leverage from Revit when we go from Revit via the FBX format into 3D Studio Max. if we just go back to the living room here and open up the render dialog again, we can see the lighting here. We're gonna have the sun and shadow settings from Revit into 3D Studio Max. We can benefit from that. We're also gonna have the background with a few clouds and the haze, etc. into 3D Studio Max. It's gonna follow us. So that we can leverage from. If we go to settings and pick up the materials, we're gonna have all the textures. We're going to have the reflections, the sample size, etc. Also gonna follow us from Revit into 3D Studio Max. Another thing we have to think about when we're gonna export from Revit to 3D Studio Max via the FBX format, we have to be in a 3D view when we export it. So I'll go to File, Export, and 3D Studio Max FBX format. I'm gonna go to Export here, and we can see there when we export an FBX file, Revit also creates an FBM folder. The FBM folder contains the data, more to speak, the sun and shadow settings, the material settings, the reflections, etc., etc. So if you're gonna move the FBX folder, be sure that you also move the FBM folder. If you move the FBX file, also move the FBM folder. And one more thing to think about is that what's visible in the 3D view is also what's going to follow us into 3D Studio Max. So if we, for instance, hide the staircase here, the staircase will not follow us into 3D Studio Max when we export it. So I'm just gonna hit save here, and we go into 3D Studio Max to see what we can do there. 3D Studio Max, and we're going to go straight into import the FBX file. I'm going to open it, and we have two presets here, in Media Entertainment and Revit. Be sure to choose the Revit. We're going to have a soft warning telling 3D Studio Max doesn't support the Revit camera. So I'm going to choose this one and hide it. So here we have the camera. We can see that we can reuse the position and not the lenses. So I'm going to delete that one. File, merge, and I pre-made a camera here, so I'm going to use that one instead. So like that. I'm going to choose it and make it active. I'm going to apply a camera modifier so I get the vertical line straight there, and I can hide the camera. Here we have the sun and sky settings. Sun and sky, it's from it comes from Revit, and we can see that we have the Helsinki air, and we have the days, the May and the time. So we're not going to do anything with the light here, so I'm going to actually hide that also. Next thing, I'm going to open up the material editor here, and what I'm also going to do, I'm going to open up the environment, and we see here they have the Mentor Physical Sky from Revit, and I'm going to open up the render setup and also the render frame window. So the first thing we're going to do is have a look at the materials. I'm going to go to materials, get material, going to go from scene here, and here we have the frame chocolate. You can see it comes like a true material, really powerful material when it comes to create realistic surfaces. You can see that we have all the settings from Revit. We have the color, etc., etc., and some additional things here, special effect. I'm going to go through that later. So we're gonna get the wall material here, so I'm gonna take that one and hit that instance like that, and here we have the red wall and the white wall, and what we're also gonna go and have is the floor, and there is the floor. We can see we have the textures and everything with us. Okay, we have a look at the materials. Sun and shadow settings already done. Materials we have checked. We're gonna go have a look at the render frame window here. Choose camera number 1 here, and I'm gonna lock it. So it's always be sure that you render camera number 1. I'm gonna go for iterative. That's the fastest one when you do test renderings. For test renderings here, I'm not gonna have a reflection, no reflections. I'm gonna go with final gather, and we have bounces here for the light, so I'm gonna crank that up to 2. geometry, if we don't change the geometry as we render, we can cache geometry. So we're going to do that. And we have the image precision. That one we're going to go really low because high image precision increases the render time. We have the indirect illumination here, a final gather we're going to use to the start. And very high, now we're going to go for draft, and we can see when I go draft here, this one's also go to drafts. This is actually the one and the same slider. So I will hit render, and we can see here as in Revit it starts to get too over bright, and that's because we don't have any exposure control right on now. And exposure control, what that does is actually on the screen here, the dimmest color, the brightest color is just 100 times brighter than the dimmest color. In real life, the brightest color is 1,000,000 billion times brighter than the dimmest color. So what we do with the exposure control, we actually simulate a real life behavior of an eye. So the photographic, I'm going to go to exposure control and choose the photographic exposure control there. Have some settings here, so I'm going to go indoor daylight. And I know from experience that the highlights, yes, they are too high, so I'm going to go for 0 there. And for the exposure value, I'm going to go for 11. This one is not the exposure control in Max is not interactive as it was in Revit, but instead, when we're testing the exposure control, we can actually save our final gather map, so we don't have to they don't have to calculate the final gather map all the time. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to choose that one, and just going to actually generate final gather map. And now it's calculating it, and I don't have to reuse that. I don't have to calculate anymore. Let's close this one. So I can lock the geometry, I can lock the final gather, and now I can just hit render here, and it just starts rendering immediately. And now we have the exposure control. We can see it looks quite nice. Only thing I want to do, I want to turn up a little bit more white, the warmer picture like we did in Revit, so the white point, and hit render again, and I reuse the final gather map, and you see it goes pretty fast. Okay. Looks kind of nice. I think we have a nice setting here for the exposure control. What we can do now is actually see if we can have some good reflections. So I'm going to turn on reflections here, and I'm going to go for a region here, and yeah, take a little bit of a strip like we did in Revit and hit render. And now we're going to have a reflection, and we can see that as in Revit we have the same reflection. I think that is actually a little bit too much, so I want to create my own settings for the reflection, and we are a little bit limited when we have the Pro material. We can't really set our own settings to that, so I'm going to change this material to an Arch and Design material instead. First I'm just going to save the texture map so I can reuse that. So I'm going to change that to an Arch and Design material. Again, a preset setting, vanish wood, you're familiar with that. I'm going to reuse the texture as I said. And now we can have a look here. You see that I can actually put my own tunings to the reflection there. So I'm going to go with 015 there. And now hit render and see what's happening. And now you see the reflection is much less, not so much impact to the whole picture. That's more what I like. Okay, we have the final gather, we have the exposure control, we have done a little bit with the reflection of material. Next thing we're going to shoot some photons into the scene. And then we're not going to use final gather, we're going to use that later, combined with the photons, but for now we're just going to shoot some photons and see what's that doing. So we have that one, and I'm gonna just do the maximum sampling radius up to, let's say, 1000 here, like that, and hit render. So you see it calculates the photon emission, and it starts to render. Some little bit more color into the scene, but it looks kind of flat. As the same way we did with the Final Getter, we can save them. So here I pre-made a photo map. This took about 45 seconds to generate, but it's still too much to do right now, so I can just hit render and see how it looks with that one. So still, you see it is more shadow, not so flat with that one. Okay, but for the high quality render I want to use a full resolution one. I have 500,000 here, so I take this one, and what shall I actually do with this one? You just increase this value, the average GI photons per light. Okay, so we have a high quality photo map. We can also enable Final Getter, and I'm going to go and get a high quality Final Getter map. So that took about 3 to 4 minutes to generate the Final Getter map. So now we're going to use the Final Getter map and the photo map together and hit render to see what's happening. Okay, now it starts to read the render fast, no pre-calculations. It starts to look really good. I don't have any reflections, everything's on, and the image precision is really low, but I still lack some shadows in the corner here, and when the wall meets the ceiling. So I'm gonna solve that with the material actually. So I go to the materials, I go to special effects, and I'm gonna enable ambient occlusion. I'm gonna go for a distance there with 750 millimeters and use color from other materials. I'm gonna do that for the white wall also. 750, use that one, and for the floor, special effects, 16, and use that one. I'm just gonna go with 250 millimeters there and hit render. And now you can see, have a look here in the corners and where the ceiling meets the wall, that we got some more color. It's detailed color. So now we have the photo map for the overall color, overall lighting and the colors, the Final Getter map for the more detailed shadows and colors and lighting, and then get ambient occlusion for the really small details. Okay, we're just gonna I'm gonna turn on reflections here. I'm gonna put up this one to a little bit higher, and just gonna hit render, and you're gonna see approximately what we're gonna get from the render in the end. Okay, now we can see a little bit nicer reflections, but it also goes a little bit slower when we have it up immediately when we increase the image precision. Okay, what I want to do more is actually add some beauty passes to our scene here that we can have use of in the post-production phase. So what I'm going to do here, as soon as this render is finished, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to the render elements here, and I'm just going to lower this one, and I'm going to add some maps here. I'm going to go for the reflections, and I'm going to go down to 001 on that one, and I'm going to also add a set depth map like that. And a set depth, I'm gonna go for like say 9,000 on that one, and I'm gonna hit render again, and now it's re-render the image, but in the background it's also render the render elements images, which I'm gonna use in Photoshop for the post-production and later on. Okay, take some time to calculate with the reflections and with the sun there. Now it's soon finished. Okay, the reflection, these render elements I say as PNG files. So here I have the set depth map, brighter and gets darker and darker, and here we have all the reflections going on in the scene. So I'll save that, and I'm going to use it in Photoshop. So the last thing I'm going to say, I just render high quality image. I have the image precision pretty high here, and otherwise I use the same settings that I showed you, and that took about 8 to 9 minutes to render, and I'm going to show you how it looks like in Photoshop now. I'm going to do some enhancements to it. So in Adobe Photoshop, where we're going to create some post-production to the image, we have the high quality render here. I have already put in the reflection pass here. You can see it like that. I'm going to use that later on. Here you can see the set depth map was saved from 3D Studio Max. I'm going to use that later on. I pre-made some filters here, so I'm going to use them. First, I want to make this picture a little bit more not so reddish. So I'm just going to drag these a little bit more yellow into the picture, maybe like that, more natural. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. I also want to have some more contrast into the picture, so I'm just going to go with curves here and increase the contrast. You see, like that. Oh, a little bit too much maybe, so I go with the linear. Linear is good enough. Yep, satisfied with that. Picture maybe a little bit too dark, so I have a level, and I'm just going to slide this one up to, let's say, 123 or something. Pretty much okay. Okay, then I can start using my reflection pass here to enhance the reflections. So I'm just going to turn that on, and I'm going to change the mood here to screen mood, like that. And now it's maybe the reflection is too much, so I'm going to use a slider here to find the right value. And maybe 35 there is pretty good. Okay, we have enhanced the reflection. Naturally, when we take a photo, it's more sharp in the beginning, and then it gets less and less sharp, or more and more blurry. So we're gonna make that happen in our picture here. So I'm gonna go to I'm gonna take all my layers here and copy it and make it to one layer like that. And then I'm gonna go to my channels here and use my set depth map like I have here, and I'm gonna apply that as an alpha map like that. So, and now I'm gonna go to my picture, and I'm gonna go to filter, and I'm gonna sharp and unsharp mask. So we're gonna put that to 200%, and you can see the preview here that is getting more and more sharper. If I turn this on, it's blurry, and if I take a preview, and it's sharp. And what the set depth map does, actually, it's getting more and more sharp here and less sharp here and more blurry in the back. So simulating a real life behavior there. Okay, that was post-production with a little bit of render elements from 3D Studio Max. So what we've seen here today, I've started in Revit and created a photorealistic image in Revit. I exported via the FBX format into 3D Studio Max, where I could enhance my rendering techniques, and I can also use what we see here, the render elements. And then I took this into Photoshop and I used them in the post-production phase to even more enhance my picture. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your time. Cheers.